Pastor Pete here. This is the second video in a particular series where I am summarizing this book, How Your Church Family Works, Understanding Congregations as Emotional Systems. And the book is written by Peter Steinke. And I've taken some key quotes from the book as I did with the first chapter. I'm going to do the second chapter now, or part one of it. And I try and put some of it into my own words. These videos are intended for church leadership, and so I'm not going to address specific situations where I'm currently involved because I want these videos to be broadly applicable. So this chapter is about anxiety and reactivity. Steinke gives a good summary introduction. Sorry, I should review the first chapter, and that was introducing systems thinking when you think of a church. Now he talks about anxiety and reactivity. And he gives a good summary introduction about anxiety affecting a human system. Here's a quote. All relationship systems become anxious. Put people together and inevitably anxiety will arise. Anxiety can be infectious. We can give it to others or catch it from them. What precisely triggers anxiety is unique to each system, I would add individual, as well. I'm still quoting. Common activators are significant changes and losses. They upset the stable patterns and balance of the system. I personally, that's the end of the quote. I have two ways of describing this using life examples besides the illness image of infectiousness or contagiousness. That's the one Peter Steinke goes to most. To that, I'll add that anxiety acts like an imaginary dark cloud that hangs over a person and looks for ways to split off and start a new cloud, over another person. So that's one. Another idea is the idea of static electricity. So that anxiety acts like static electricity, except that it is an anxiety charge that builds in one or two people and then starts seeking other people to jump to. So those are two other ways of thinking of how anxiety works within a system. The effect of this, the effect that it has, is of spreading the anxiety. The way to, and my puns in here that have electrical references are all on purpose, the way to short circuit this spreading is to have people well grounded emotionally such that the anxiety charge does not jump to them and stay and grow. Challenge is that people who are not well grounded, who are emotionally reactive, will hold the charge and they'll receive it from someone else. And some even know how to amp it up. These charges will keep those people uncomfortable and anxious until they find someone who will help them find relief by accepting even a part of it. Anxiety charges need a place to land. Our author points this out in this quote. Equally important as to what sets off anxiety is where it is focused. Anxiety is free floating, but eventually it drains off and settles somewhere. Relationship systems have favorite ducts and crevices for the deposit of its flow. The most vulnerable or responsible people in the relationship network are the usual targets. And I want to highlight that by repeating it. This is an important thing to understand. The most vulnerable or the most responsible, like actually responsible people, in the relationship network are the usual targets for that anxiety or the stories it creates. This is a very important point. It is a sort of pecking order that churches fall into. When anxiety rises, they look around for a scapegoat, a person or a role onto which to release the charge. In doing this, they're acting out a belief, a subconscious one, that finding a target will bring relief from the static anxiety that they feel. Think of the stories of police making a quick arrest to calm the anxious public. It's the nature of church systems and a pastor's role in them that either someone low on the social status ladder or the pastor become this lightning rod. Congregations seem to choose the pastor most frequently because in many situations, the pastor is, again subconsciously, considered impermanent. The difficult people in the church system are not going anywhere. We have to keep living with them. So if we can get the pastor, if we can paste the blame on the pastor, zap it into the pastor, and get them to a point of moving on, then we believe things are going to be better. So if we can, it's a fallacy, but it's played out again and again and again. Different church systems have different levels of anxiety immunity. Some are very immune. Some are very sensitive. This most negatively affects relationship systems that are not good at tolerating or managing differences. In a church culture that has a lot of pressure built into it to be, look, and act the same as all the others, anxiety will easily be stirring things. Right? We even use language like stirring the pot. So we have to be aware as church leaders, according to Steinke, that as we learn this, that anxiety is not always a negative. Anxiety can be our deliverance. Anxiety has motivational power. Healthy anxiety can provoke change that's needed. It prods and pushes us toward innovation or transformation. If, however, it reaches a certain intensity, it begins to prevent the very change it provokes. What is stimulus becomes a restraint, I would say a locking mechanism. In that kind of anxiety, as a system, we lose our head, we lose our cool, as we say, and essentially our awareness and our composure. We are too reactive to be responsive. Another key phrase. We end up being too reactive to be responsive. End of quote. Some kinds of anxiety, say about a leaking church roof, are helpful because they motivate us towards making repairs. Anxiety about not understanding something can motivate us to learn. But each person and each system has their own threshold for when anxiety begins to freeze them or cause them to fight reactively or gets them to run away. Here's something that you could start doing with this learning. And maybe even you might need to review this video a couple of times or read the written version of it to understand these assignments. Some first steps in learning to work with systems thinking are to learn and to monitor your own emotions. What do you do when you are anxious? How do you act? This one's kind of fun because loved ones often know the answer better to that one than we know ourselves. So this could be a conversation. What do I act like when I'm anxious? That is a clue for you that I am. Ask somebody that. Another piece of this is to learn to stop in certain moments and to ask yourself, wait a minute, what is that feeling? For example, you're talking to somebody and you feel your hackles rising, or you feel generally irritated. Well, then pause within yourself and say, what is that feeling? And then see if you can come up with a theory as to what was creating that feeling in you. These are advices I'm giving from what I've learned. This is not straight out of Steinke at all, because they begin to teach us to not accept the anxiety of others and to recognize when it's happening, and then within ourselves to say, no, I'm not taking on this anxiety. This is their anxiety. And although they're working really hard to make it mine, I think it's their problem. Another step in this journey of learning how to deal with systems thinking and anxiety in systems, particularly church systems, is to learn to do what is called self-differentiation. Learn to self-differentiate or to differentiate yourself from the other. This has been one of the hard lessons in my life to learn. I'll say more about that, all of that in the future. But for now, in those moments when some kind of feeling or emotion like anger or irritation is rising in you, maybe because someone is trying to cast their anxieties upon you, learn to remind yourself that these are their anxieties. And you do not have at least an immediate obligation to take them on yourself. In fact, you can ask yourself, why is this person trying to transfer this to me? What's that all about? I have come to points with people where I was able to say calmly and sympathetically something like, I can see that this upsets you a lot, and that can't be pleasant to be that upset. But it's not upsetting me. And maybe you have to work to do to figure out why it upsets you. See how that puts the anxiety back where it belongs. We're in a society where we somehow believe that authority figures are supposed to rescue us from all that troubles us. That's not really a good worldly even wisdom, let alone a biblical one. Sometimes there are things that we need to work on and nobody can solve for us. So as you learn to watch the anxiety level in yourself and in the system and how these two interact, your perspective and understanding has opportunity to change, as does your ability to stay calm and yet gracious or grace-filled as well. In fact, in my experience has been that compassion for people who seem trapped in anxiety has increased as my anger at them diminished. As I began to see another aspect of all of this, that those who are chronically anxious tend to be that because of trauma that is unresolved in their life. A couple more things to ask yourself or to reflect on in your own congregational system. Can you identify where the anxiety on particular issues that come up starts in your congregational system? Where's its source? Is the source consistent? That will say something. Do I have a high or low threshold for anxiety in myself and others? Why would that be? One of my challenges personally is that I feel very responsible for other people's feelings, particularly women, and I've learned over time that and then I try and fix it and just get in more trouble. And so I've had to let go, and I've had to learn that their feelings are their feelings. And there are times when I'm not responsible for them feeling in a not pleasant situation. Ask yourself, how well grounded might I be in the experience of others? Like, do other people experience me as grounded? The likelihood is that if you are well grounded, then the chronically anxious will not come to you to try and release their anxiety, because it just disappears when they're talking to you. And they seem to need it in their lives. Here's another question. Does anxiety in our congregation often seem to be being sourced in the same person, the same family, the same clan? What might be the systems thinking reasons behind that? And so on. But that's enough for now. I'm trying to do this as segments or building blocks toward understanding, and I think this will give you plenty to think about. So I'll finish chapter 2 in another video at another time. Technical problems.